I recently revisited an old infographic that I made, basically going over the 10,000 hour rule and how we apply the Pareto principle to that, and how that is going to correspond to our training. Now, even though I've got some stuff written on the board, those are really just notes for me. I will actually put the infographic here on the board, and along with an image or two else. The idea is, if we can take the 10,000 hour rule kind of at face value, we know that it is not a particularly accurate thing. Plenty of work has come out since then, basically showing that like it's more complicated than just 10,000 hours of practice, right? There are components. There's a very good Veritasium video on that, which I will link in the Substack. And when we look at all that stuff, we're just taking the 10,000 hours as kind of just the observed metric of what the experts have gone through. And the thing is that you can correlate that pretty well. Like if you look at how much Olympic athletes train, and it's pretty varied across different sports and everything, but Olympic athletes are training something in the ballpark of 4 to 8 years to get to the Olympics, right? To get to that world stage. And look, I know Olympic athletes are not the same as pro athletes. You know, Olympics are supposed to be the best of the amateurs, and then professionals are, like look at professional boxing. Pro boxers are better than Olympic boxers. So this is not a one-to-one correlation. These are squishy numbers, so take it with a grain of salt. We're not doing hard science here. We're just kind of building algorithms. So, right, in general, the 10,000 hour rule states that it's going to take roughly about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. And again, there's a few other components to that, in order to reach expert level. Well, if we apply the 80-20 rule to that, that breaks down to 2,000 hours. And then from 2,000, you can continue breaking this down, right? 2,000 hours, 400 hours, 80 hours, 16 hours, 3.5 hours. And so when we're looking at this, why would we apply the 80-20 rule? Well, in the way that I look at things and the way we're talking about historically, if we look at the way that black belt was initially designed as defining somebody who is, of rank, who is basically, is a competition thing, right? If somebody is of rank enough to be a competitive fighter, right? It was kind of and I'm really oversimplifying it here, but if that's kind of the mark of black belt, that black belt is not mastery, and black belt has never met mastery. In some ways, while people praise Brazilian jiu-jitsu for kind of maintaining the standards of what it takes to be a black belt, for the most part, where Brazilian jiu-jitsu gets to, say, purple belt is probably where you would consider a traditional like judo or karate black belt back in the actual fighting days, not so much in the strip mall McDojo days. The idea then is, how long does it take you to get to a point of being functionally competent, of being competitive, but not necessarily being the best? The 80-20 rule is a really good proxy for that. And again, the 80-20 rule is not really hard science, right? The Pareto principle, the Pareto equation gets a little more complicated, right? This is a simplified version of it, but the 80-20 rule basically says that the first 20% of effort that you expend on something is going to get you 80% of the results. These are not hard numbers, these are squishy numbers. And then it's going to take you the other 80% of your effort over the course of your career doing the thing to reach the last 20% of gains, right? What we're talking about is an asymptotic curve that actually levels out as you go, because you just reach points of diminishing returns. This is a really, really good model for things, and it's something that we see in sports. It's something that we see in, fine manual skills. It's definitely something that we see in lifting. So we see this leveling off and this point of diminishing returns things. We see this definitely in quality of tools and quality of instruments. You get over the hump, and for the price that you pay, you're getting smaller and smaller gains. And for some people, that's absolutely worth it, and for many people, it's not. So that's an important point to look at, and that hump should be kind of where we're looking at where black belt is. And that's a pretty good idea. So if we were to break down how long it's going to take to reach black belt, we have to understand that we're not looking at 10,000 hours, we're looking at about 2,000 hours. And the not hard numbers. I'm going to keep repeating that. These are squishy numbers. You have about, this is based on some pretty heavy assumptions, but you're going to have somewhere in the ballpark of probably 20 to 30 hours a week of time that you can dedicate to non-essential functions, to things, of just personal decision making, right? Whether that's entertainment, whether that is training, whatever. 20 to 30 hours a week, using my particular numbers that I was estimating, and these are my own estimates. You're looking at about 25 hours a week that are available for you to engage in stuff. Now, nobody's training 25 hours a week except for professionals, and some professionals are training more than that, but they're professionals. They're actually getting paid to train. Most of us have to, work to earn a living. Most of us actually have to engage in something that is outside of our martial arts pursuit in order to earn a living. And even for teachers like me, your time in teaching and your time working on the business is going to be taken away from your training. It's not like running a martial arts school lets you train 24 hours a day. That is not reality, nor could your body withstand that. You're going to be spending a lot more time like doing research, taking care of business, looking at financials, looking at marketing, stuff like that. So even if you are a martial arts professional, outside of being a professional fighter, you're probably not going to be able to dedicate 25 hours a week to training because you've got other things you're going to be looking at doing. For people who are really serious, you're probably looking at more like 5 to 10 hours a week of training. And for most people, you're looking at most people training 2 to 3 days a week for a 1 hour class, meaning 2 to 3 hours a week. Like on average, you're not looking at a huge amount of training time. Now, if you're going to break those training times up over the course of 2,000 hours, right, and kind of figure that out per for weeks and stuff, you're going to be looking at a significant chunk of time dedicated to trying to gain that level of even black belt, much less mastery. So if you're training 2 to 3 hours a week to get to that 2,000 hour black belt level, you're literally talking decades, like 65 years or so to get to that point. That is a lot. So if you're training only 2 to 3 hours a week, you're actually looking at like 65 years to get to that 10,000 hours, which honestly seems pretty accurate for the way that most people train. Most people never break out of the novice stage, and a lot of people get stuck in that early post-novice stage where they get just kind of okay, but they're not really even competitive. Most people never get to that black belt level. And that's fine, right? But if we were to apply that to the 2,000 hours as opposed to the 10, you're looking at closer to like 13 years, right? And it can give or take people's consistency, give or take, their actual learning ability, and comparing their learning ability with their teacher's teaching ability, because those things have to interconnect. You're going to be looking at like we're saying 13 years based on our math, but let's just say 10 to 15 years to get to black belt. That's actually not unreasonable. Unfortunately, a lot of people are doing 2 to 3 hours and getting black belt in a few years, which does speak to the diminishment of their training. Now, look, maybe you're a Kung Fu genius and you just pick stuff up faster, but that's usually only going to apply to technical stuff. Maybe you are a natural born fighter, but then that's usually not going to apply to the technical stuff. And usually like gaining black belt or equivalent is going to require you to have some interconnection between fighter and technical. If you are doing just a rote memorization, I can regurgitate techniques as taught to me, yeah, sure, you're going to get through that a lot faster. But do you know anything? Not generally. You've memorized a bunch of sequences. That's That's barely more than dancing. And that's kind of the complaint about the whole, McDojo black belt thing, right? If you're doing 10 hours a week for that 2,000 hours, then you're looking at, and again, this is of like dedicated, legitimate practice. If you're doing 10 hours a week, then you're looking at about 4 years for that black belt level. And again, look, some people are going to be just absolutely quick learning geniuses at this stuff. They just have a natural knack for it. There's nothing you can do about that. Some people are going to move faster, and some people are going to be truly, truly remedial. And that's fine. Nothing against them. They should be training, but they just have to accept that it's going to take longer. And you cannot compare, right, the AP to the remedial student and be like, oh, it's unfair that this guy doesn't perform like this. They're opposite sides of the bell curve. And most people are going to fall somewhere in the middle. And we're kind of basing this off of the in the middle average, completely arbitrary in the middle average based on some estimated numbers. But 4 years to get black belt at 10 hours a week is totally doable if you're willing to dedicate that kind of time and energy to doing the thing right. And again, if you tend to be a little bit lower on the average side, it might take you, somewhere more like 5 to 10 years, right? And if you're a little more gifted, it, may take you 2 to 3 years. It depends, right? And if you're coming in from already having a baseline, right? Because not everybody's coming into a martial art completely untrained. If you're coming in with a certain baseline, that's almost like being a gifted student, and you're going to be able to progress more quickly because you've already got some fundamentals down, and you're looking at more tweaking the details so that they fit within your platform. So we do have to pay attention to that. And look, there are different learning curves, and it depends on where your starting point is, and that confluence of teaching style and learning style actually meeting in the middle and creating something that actually works, right? And if you get a hand in glove kind of situation where you have the right teacher for the right student, you're going to get stellar results. And if you have wrong teacher, wrong student, you're going to have really, really subpar results. But oftentimes, and I've mentioned this before, I don't know when the last time was, but supposedly there's an Ip Man phrase statement where he said something to the effect of finding a good teacher is great, but finding a good student is almost impossible, or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but the idea is honestly that a good student can do more with a mediocre teacher than a great teacher can do with kind of a poor student. Even a poor teacher, if you're a good student, you can still gain something from the material, because a poor teacher is still going to be at least attempting to give you the information, right? Assuming that they're not holding something back, which is a different mark of a poor teacher, right? But let's just say a low quality teacher, not somebody who's just maliciously insecure about their position or whatever. A bad teacher does nothing more than deliver the information to you and let you muck through it on your own. Well, if you're a good student, you can do a lot with that, right? They're not going to be able to give you good and appropriate feedback or anything. But if you're a good student, you can do a lot with that. You can do an absolute lot with that. But look, a great teacher with a student that doesn't know how to learn, or is frankly not capable of learning because the nuance and complexity are too much for them to grasp, and you have to take extremely remedial steps, it's going to be really hard to help that person progress. Now, again, if you find the right teacher for a remedial student, then they can do really well. It's not going to make the remedial student not remedial, but it's at least going to help them maximize their potential. And that's really what we're talking about, right? Is optimizing and maximizing your potential within what you're willing to do. So, how long should it take you to get a black belt? That depends on your learning style and your teacher's teaching ability, and that depends on what your baseline is. That depends on how gifted or remedial you are, That depends on how much time and effort you're willing to put in. That depends on what your end goal is. It depends on how complex and nuanced the material is. Obviously, the more complex and nuanced something is, the more difficult it is going to be to learn, because you just have to dial things in so much more than if something is much more gross motor patterns, which is precisely why I recommend starting children with combat sports and not like necessarily traditional martial arts, because combat sports are already stripped down and kind of made into those gross motor patterns that kind of get you a decent baseline that you're not going to be left, drowning if you walk away from it, as opposed to being like a technical master at doing, forms and one steps, but having no real experience. So anyway, that's kind of the long and short of it, right? The 10,000 hour rule is very squishy numbers. It's not real statistics. It's not real math. But if we're just taking it as kind of a heuristic or an algorithm to play with, then we can break it down like this, and it's not a bad rule of thumb. It's really not a bad rule of thumb at all. It works out pretty well given what we know about how people train, and to allow us to set expectations and allow us as teachers to set curriculums in a way that are going to at least allow that to fill out in a proper way. Again, I will link to the Veritasium video on Substack, because it's phenomenal. I don't know that I'm going to have any really other Substack references, but definitely go and check out the Substack to check out that Veritasium video. And of course, I'll put the infographic in there as well. But look, it is really important that both as a student and as a teacher, that you kind of have these algorithms, because you want your training to be purposeful and well directed. You don't want it to be just kind of slapdashery, right? You want it to actually have some direction and some momentum, and stuff like this is really helpful. So with that, I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share. Check us out on our other socials, and please head over to blacksunboxing.com to get a little more info, including how to contact us. Furthermore, if you are in the Phoenix area, please feel free to stop in, say hi, join in for a class, whatever. Also, if you ever see us cite sources or just for additional content, please check out our Substack. That is where we put all of the sources we use in our videos and is a major part of this. Plus, it serves as a membership platform for long distance learning and for people who would like to support us but aren't local. We would greatly appreciate it if you signed up. Even just the free membership helps us out a lot. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Good journey.